Ho 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 and Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays if you don't celebrate it. Today is the anniversary of the day that I got what I thought was the best video game system ever. 1986, 30, wow. And welcome back to the heart of the stories we tell. I'm Rob the host, and this is another look deep into what makes a story, a theory on storytelling by a storyteller who believes that every story has merit. And tonight's episode is The Legend of Zelda, an in-depth look. And you know what? Let's talk about where we came from before we get to that. We started by talking about the simplistic games that people played back in the 80s and when I was talking about 30 years ago. We then talked about much more in-depth story-driven games that were more on rails. We then talked about the fact that there were open-world games. And now you know what I'm going to talk about? I'm going to talk about the evolution from one to the other. The most simplistic game that became a series. As much as Zelda's one of my favorites, it's not 100% unique. Metroid, Castlevania, a whole bunch of ones went on to become whole legacies. However, I also haven't gotten to play every Zelda game, but the ones I have all range between Electrum and Platinum in the rating. That means that they are all well above the gold standard. And when people talk about the fact that someday they might be a Netflix series, I get so excited. Because it's not like there was ever any show about this.
Nice job, hero.
Hey, excuse me, princess.
Okay, maybe there was. Spoiler alert for the Zelda story. Screw it. You know what? Once again, we're talking about a 30-year-old story. And you know what? Even that cartoon had some benefit to it.
It's me, Zelda.
Oh yeah, I almost forgot. After saving the Triforce from evil, the hero gets his reward. Ow!
Don't you ever whistle at me again.
I may never whistle again, period.
Don't you ever clean in here?
Excuse me, princess.
From the feminist perspective, that was pretty good. That's telling you that women aren't trophies, that women can save themselves, and giving a powerful female protagonist. And Zelda does evolve like that over time. But alright, let's get started talking about the games themselves. I talked about the first game way back when, at the beginning of this month. Caves and exploration, and the whole idea of going out and having an adventure with only the most simplistic of stories to back it. I also mentioned that there was a lot of world to cover, things to explore, the fact that there were secrets, even dungeons. The maps were actually pretty amazing. But what if I told you that the whole story was closer to the end of the story than the beginning? What if I told you that was the end of the story, and that the story itself was about a demon, a goddess, and an immortal champion? I know what you'd say. Ganon's kind of a demon, but there was no goddess and no immortal champion in that story. Well, there kinda was. Because, you see, Link is an immortal champion who's reborn every generation. And in that generation comes the demon Demise, not Ganon, Demise, and the reincarnation of the goddess Hylia in the form of a princess named Zelda. Notice anything here? Yeah. The three protagonists, well, two protagonists and the antagonist, that show up time and time again are destined into a repeating cycle, a curse that this demon laid. And all you need to do is take a look at how the legendary champion evolved over time to see the fact that this is still the same person, the same soul. Now remember at the beginning of the first one I told you there was a complex timeline that split in three? Well, there's two parts of this that really matter. The absolute beginning, which is known as the Skyward Sword, which is one of the most recent games, and one that came out just as I was getting out of video games the first time, the Ocarina of Time, because like everything complex, we needed to throw time travel into this. Now, to be fair, these games were not always linked. When that first game came out, it wasn't meant to be a sequel or a sequence. All it was meant for was for you to have fun. Many of these games are really just remakes, and that's part of why they had to do this with the timeline, because it wasn't meant to be a timeline. But over time it kind of built onto something. And then they came out with this book that, thanks to one of my best friends last Christmas, I get to read now. However, even before that, people were starting to look and compare at things. The original game had all sorts of little Easter eggs in it The original game had this map that you could actually unfold and look at, unlike the Metroid games, and as such we knew what Hyrule looked like. But even as early as when I was still playing The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, my favorite of them so far, you could see the map is similar, but it's not exactly the same. Things have been moved around. So, it didn't quite mash up as an exact sequel, but it also didn't make sense that it had nothing to do with it, because it was still Hyrule, right? Lots of theories floated around, and that's before you get into fierce deities and dead links, and whether or not there's going to be a new one for the new system, and all sorts of things like adventures into the Minish Cap, adventures into Shadow Realms, the new Linkea, who, you know what, that's a pretty cool female Link. I have my own theory, maybe I'll share that at the end. The one that had the 4 swords, you name it. Everything could just be a little bit different. So fan theories were all over the place. But how is the executives at Nintendo going to actually fix this and make it all fit? They promised they could, and they followed through with that promise. It's a little convoluted, but I'm going to walk through it with you. Because this timeline basically starts and then goes through a handful of the games to the Ocarina of Time, and then at Ocarina of Time splits into 3 spots. But it all starts with the Skyward Sword. So let's start there. With the first Link and the first Zelda, his friend, who was kidnapped, and he had to go rescue her, and used the goddess Hylia's sword as his guide, along with the spirit Fi. And he found out that she was kidnapped by the demon Demise. And the reason why Demise kidnapped her was to get to the incarnation of Hylia. And with that, we have the fight of a lifetime. And the story is, again, not the most complex. It's still a video game. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. Why to fight the bad guy. But what happens that's interesting is what happens when you beat the bad guy. Quick setup. Link has already beaten Demise once and has now challenged him to one-on-one combat because his essence is pretty much unkillable. And in order to stop him, he has the Goddess Sword, which is the sword that will one day become the Master Sword. Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Ah, so you've decided to meet your end in battle after all. It pleases me greatly to see this. Take a moment and appreciate the surroundings. It's where you shall fall, and it will serve as your grave. Demise is a little overdramatic, if you haven't noticed. And Link doesn't talk, because, well, Link never talks. The hate for the gods that has boiled within me, you will soon feel. You will taste all of it in the bite of my blade. Yep, see? Overdramatic bad guy. The only question left is how long you did. Let's just get to the skipping part. After all, you don't actually want me to be a voice actor, and you don't want to watch me play a video game. That's not what you come here for. Needless to say, there's a battle, and of course, look at that. The hero's gonna win it. Who would have ever guessed? No one ever saw that. Okay, here we go. So you beat Demise for the second time, and you've knocked him down, and he just jumps back up because, remember, he is, the spirit of a demon, and you have to beat him again. So, here we go again. Let's fast forward again. It is a really cool fight if you want to go and find someone that does a Let's Play. Walking through the whole game has a lot of interesting twists and turns. But okay, is he really gone this time? Is he really dead? Oh, wait, just like a horror movie, gotta stand back up. One more time. This time, it's a little different. Yep, our silent protagonist still just stares him down. Extraordinary you stand as a paragon of your kind, human. You fight like no man or demon I have ever known, though this is not the end. My hate never perishes. It is born anew in a cycle with no end. I will rise again. Those like you, those who share the blood of the goddess, the spirit of the hero, they are eternally bound to this curse. An incarnation of my hatred shall ever follow your kind, dooming them to wander a blood-soaked sea of darkness for all of time. And then he dies. But you see, that powerful curse, that's really what causes the entire series of Zelda. Now, yeah, it's a retcon. They didn't come up with this when they had the original one. But you'll see here, this sword, the one from A Link to the Past and many other games afterwards, the Master Sword, it was the goddess sword for this game. It had a spirit Fi bound to it. Fi takes in the power of demise. I have confirmed the eradication of the Demon King. Yay, eradication. His residual consciousness has been absorbed into the Master Sword and is now sealed away. You know, the sword that will become known as Evil's Bane. Skip ahead, skip ahead, skip ahead, and we get to Fi, the spirit of the sword, telling Link, hey, put the sword back in the pedestal, bind it for the future, because there's going to come a time when you're going to need this again. And then merges and is gone. You can tell at this point that Link is no regular RPG player, and that this is obviously the end of the game. How can you tell that? Because no one would ever put the most powerful weapon artifact away. But okay, you say, that's Skyward Sword, and that's why there are so many Links with so many parallel stories. But what about this timeline thing? Well, we're getting there. Because you see, even with all that, there wasn't enough to explain all the changes. But there was a game that could. Because you see, there was a game called Ocarina of Time. And well, the actual main artifact of it was an ocarina that allowed you to time travel. So what happens here is, young Link finds about the problem, fights his way through to get to the Master Sword that's locked away, tries to pull it, but the sword knows he's not old enough to wield it yet, so it freezes him in time, and as such, Ganon, the reincarnation of Demise, wins. However, then the adult Link pulls the sword many years later, comes out of the time link, and boom, comes and defeats him. But at that point, he realizes it was too late. So, he uses the ocarina to travel back to when he was a kid, but now as an adult, and beat him then. Sound complicated? Ooh, boy is it. But from that fun, albeit confusing story, comes the fact that there are 3 timelines. Now you see, there was the timeline where Link was a child and got himself locked away, and Ganon ruled for a while, and then he came back as adult Link and beat him. There's the timeline where he went back in time to when he was a kid and defeated him before he won. So I know what you're saying, that's only 2. One where he defeated him, and one where he didn't defeat him until later. Well, there's another possibility, one everyone kind of misses out on. If you're any type of gamer at all, you're used to losing, sometimes over and over again. But what about that game over screen? What happens when that's it? The hero fails. And that's why we have 3 timelines. Because we have the hero as the child, the hero as the adult, and the hero fails timeline. So what does this really mean? Well, it means that we have a starting point where there's a handful of games, and then we go into the point where it splits into 3 different sets of games, and then even farther down it splits in one of those into 3 sets of games, and in one of those sets of games is that original game, which means all of this led to one of the worst possible outcomes for the kingdom being one of the best for us, The Legend of Zelda. Hyrule's a weird place, with ever-changing maps and sky lofts and who knows what else, and a timeline that would require a PhD in time travel to truly understand. But at the end of the day, it's one of the most fascinating stories ever. There's lots of little things I didn't even touch on. Once again, we have the fierce deity, the masks, Termina, who knows how many hundreds of other things. that you could cram into talking about the stories that are Zelda. But before that's game over, I do want to bring up that there's a lot of other things I want to talk about, the Triforce and all sorts of other things, but specifically, this character right here. She's been a little bit of a, how do we put it, hot topic as of late. Let's be honest, gender-swapped heroes aren't exactly something new. We have Supergirl, we have Miss Martian, we have all sorts of ones. But you know what? We've never had a female Link, and yes, we've had Zelda, and Zelda herself kicks serious ass, and even has the ability to join Link on adventures. They were originally going to make this just a female Link, and then they talked about making it Link's younger sister, but you know what? There's problems with both of those. At the end of the day, I hope Linkle is going to appear in future games, and is going to expand the repertoire, the idea, and the legend of Zelda. As much as this whole month has been about video games, it's really been about Zelda to me. So leave me a comment if you liked this, or if you want to see other things about Zelda. Specifically, I have my own idea for my own pitch on what a game could be in the Legend of Zelda series. I also want to talk about the idea of there being a Netflix series, and I'd love to dissect individual games, especially A Link to the Past. It has a very interesting story. So comment down below which ones you like, and of course like this video to show your support. And if you haven't already, now would be a great time to subscribe to my channel so that we can build a community talking about all sorts of stories, including video game stories. For now, I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday and a Happy New Year. I'll see you next year.